Good morning and welcome to Missoula Real Estate Today. This is Denny Bedard. Missoula Real Estate Today is presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate. Diane's been working with buyers and sellers in the Missoula market for over 25 years. Along with her trusted partners, Diane provides complete service for your real estate transaction and brings us guests who provide useful information on industry-related topics and trends. And now, Missoula Real Estate Today on News Talk, KGVO.
Well, hey, good to have you with us, as always. Appreciate you joining us and making us part of your weekend here on News Talk KGVO. A return guest, although it has been a while. I couldn't believe how long it had been, actually. Matt Kavanaugh, owner of Five Valleys Restorations, back on the show. How you doing there, Matt?
I'm good.
Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you coming back in.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Well, it's been long enough. We better do a quick refresher, some background on Five Valleys Restoration business and how you came to pursue the whole thing.
Yeah, 15 years ago, I started Five Valleys Restoration with a little can-do attitude and a 92 Ford Ranger. But I started out as a high school kid. My dad gave me a couple options when the first job I ever had, I got fired from. It was my mom and dad. My dad is an optometrist, and I was a file boy for him. I would come in years ago and just file everything at their office.
Yeah.
And my baseball career as a 14, 15-year-old kid got in the way, and too much for them, so I was terminated from their office. So I had to go find a different job, and he gave me a couple options, but we were lucky enough across the street for a gentleman who supported our hockey program when we were all kids, and he owned a local restoration company. And they were actually a company that did national catastrophes, so we get to travel all over the place. So as a 15-year-old kid, I walked in and asked for a job, and he put me to work detailing vehicles and cleaning carpets and doing all the fun stuff right after school and before school. And in the summers, I'd go to work, and then I'd go to baseball practice and do all the fun things. So that's how I kind of got the start of it. And then I worked through high school and college breaks and all those. And that's how it came to be. And then I worked for some other restoration companies before I started Five Valleys. But 15 years ago, just took a leap of faith, and it's done okay. So we're doing okay today.
That's a great story. Do you still have the 92 Ford Ranger in the Five Valleys Museum? Or?
I wish. I loved that truck. It didn't have air conditioning, so it was a little uncomfortable. And little 5-speed, just a great little 2.9 liter. It was awesome.
It got you going, right?
It did. Leaked oil like a sieve, though, so
boy.
Clients wouldn't like it today with oil stains all over their driveway.
Since it's Diane Beck at Windermere Real Estate Show, I usually ask, what the relationship, there you go, Denny, between you and Windermere, how you folks got to know each other?
Well, I know Diane on a personal level, but obviously we do a lot of work with her on the professional level too. Anytime her clients have any type of mold or water issues, we're the first call to go in and take a look and do an evaluation. Obviously within the real estate trades, there's a lot of, after a home inspection, some of the things that can be found, and our name tends to pop up with a lot of different issues that can be resolved with them. So that's how we know Diane from the professional level, is being able to work with her to resolve some of the issues within their real estate transactions.
We're going to do a rundown of many of the services you offer, but one came to mind when we sat down here this morning, it being winter and all, and it's been a pretty rough winter. Do you encounter issues with snow and ice, customers having problems with that? Yeah,
ice damming tends to be a common problem, especially with the heavy snowfall, and then obviously the melt off and then the refreeze. And what happens is with an ice dam is it works itself back up underneath the shingles. Once it freezes, it works itself back up underneath. And it freezes within that bottom 18 to 24 inches because there's no insulation in the softening. And in that process, though, it freezes and works up underneath the shingle, and it finds its path of least resistance into the home. And then that's where you start to see moisture coming into the home, because obviously it gets to a certain point from the ice working, and then it gets heat again, and it starts to thaw out. Yeah. So we see temperatures, where it's 40, and then it's 15, and it's 40, and it's 15, and you'll check your gutters out, and if you've got, 3 feet of 18-inch around icicles hanging down like some people do, and it's just overwhelming in those gutters, you most likely have an ice dam and can be watching for it. And sometimes you luck out and it doesn't come back in, and other times you just start to see those wet spots in the corner. Other times you see a lot more moisture come back in, depending on the severity of it. But we do tend to see a lot of them. And they're hard. Sometimes it's just heat escaping into the attic a lot of times causes excess melt off. Looking at people's roofs that in the middle of the winter, that if they don't have any snow on them, Maybe they're not the best insulated and they're going to have some issues like that. But homes that have a lot of snow on their roof, that means that heat is not escaping out of the home, so it's well insulated.
Damage-wise, what can that potentially do, and what do you have to do to take care of it?
Yeah, you obviously get wet drywall, you get insulation in there, framing. Something that's a lot missed over the years in our trade is guys will come in with meters and they'll slap them on drywall and it's dry. Our big focus, and has been for years now, is framing. If you can dry the framing, you can dry the materials, and a lot of times we have to tear that out to access the framing, especially with an ice dam issue because it does penetrate in behind everything. Tear it out, dry it out, sanitize everything, make sure it's safe. Obviously, resolve the source. So you want to try and make sure they don't have any future ice dams in those areas. And
right.
That can be a whole plethora of things. It can be heat tape, it can be heat wire, it can be, you name it. There's all kinds of things. Improving the insulation, those things can all fix those things, and then put it all back together. Get it all put back together in a proper manner and get them up and running.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate here on News Talk KGVO. And my guest, Matt Kavanaugh. Matt is the owner of Five Valleys Restoration here in Missoula. Let's talk about some of the other services. Matt, this is a pretty wide umbrella, I know, but I put down construction and repair. I imagine that's a large part of the day-to-day operations at Five Valleys Restoration. Huh?
It is, and that's one of the things that in our trade, our industry, is it's vital for a lot of people is to be able to do a full service for them, take it apart and put it back together. Obviously, with the nature of the building trades today, it starts to become a little bit of a struggle where we used to be able to put a home back together in a little bit more of a timely manner than we do now, but obviously there's a lot of struggles. Short staffing from not only us but from our subcontractors as well. So it's taking a little bit more time than we would like, and we're obviously working day to day to try and resolve those issues. But yeah, taking what we take apart, we put back together. We aren't building any new houses from the ground up. We leave those to the pros.
Yeah.
We obviously are a licensed general contractor, but that's not our bread and butter, and we don't want to step on their toes because we don't want them stepping on our toes.
How about fire and smoke damage? I guess one kind of leads to the other, but how big a part of that is what all you do?
That's a very large part of our business. The fire and smoke for not only structure but contents. Inside of a home, people often forget that the home and the structure itself suffered damage, but so did the people's individual items. And so that's a full service we offer as well, where we go in and inventory each item, pack it out, take it to our facility. We have a brand new facility out by the Y. At our facility, we have a full contents handling division where we can clean everything on site. We store it, we clean it, we re-inventory it, and we store it until the structure is ready for us to move it back in for them. From the structure standpoint, it's basically what you think. It's getting the source out, getting the odor out of the home, the smoke out, obviously charred materials removed, and getting them rebuilt in a timely manner and trying to get them up and running as well.
How about mold remediation and removal of all that?
It's a big part of our business, and actually just talking to some of the builders today about code changes and upgrades and different things, which are not for the better when it comes to dealing with this stuff, we'll most likely get busier. We're building homes tighter than we've ever built them before. There's a lot of homes we're seeing today that have never even been lived in that have potential microbial growth issues. So it's been very big, and with all the real estate, we've obviously had a very busy real estate. The Diane Beck Show here, we've had a very busy real estate season for the last God knows how many years, which has kept us busy on transactional work. So we've attics, crawl spaces, things not vented properly, those types of things. We don't see the homes with mold from the top down or the walls are black. We do after a major water loss. It sits there for a while, or a vacation home. But for the most part, it's a lot of attics, a lot of crawl spaces, those types of things.
You mentioned updated codes changing, not necessarily for the better. What is your concern there?
Well, they're building the homes so tight. I mean, you look at the homes from 40 years ago to homes today, and we had a lot of air. We could a lot of air move through those homes, which, from keeping them warm, probably wasn't the best. But modern day, everything is built so tight, from the amount of air exchanges that they're asking for. the venting. We don't have a lot of venting, and like crawl space would be an example of, we used to vent our crawl spaces and now we don't. We have additional sources to try and create these conditioned crawl spaces, and it's not that effective.
All right.
And understanding the airflow is a big thing for us, which we're trying to really educate our builders, and some of them are open to it and some of them aren't, which that's okay. That's to each their own.
Yeah. Water and everybody's favorite, sewer damage. What all do you find yourself doing in those areas?
Well, we've had a very busy water damage season from the initial freeze and around Thanksgiving area, and then going into Christmas, and then again just a couple weeks ago, those dropping below zero temperatures, freeze for a few days, and then a real nice
thing.
Yep, and then it thaws out and all your pipes freeze.
Right.
So we've had a lot of those, and with the increase in the amount of folks moving here from out of state, we have some seasonal homes that have pipes break in them and no one's in them, and then a couple weeks later we find them. So we've had an uptick in that. Our guys have been very busy from about Thanksgiving to current.
Hazmat trauma, that's not something every business like yours wants to get involved in. Are you seeing more of that?
It's blood cleanup and different things, and I've always described it as nobody wants to do it, but somebody has to do it.
Sure.
And so our guys are very well trained in it. We have a few guys that actually have blood cleanup training from our industry. So it's not ideal by any means, but it is a service we offer, and our guys are very good at it. Having to have a lot of ethical decisions when you do it, and understanding the emotions involved with it too. But yeah, it's not ideal that we would do it, but it is a service that we offer to be there for folks when they need us.
Yeah, I immediately associated with the drug issue in a house. I didn't think
we do
about
too.
blood.
Yes, methamphetamine
Sure.
obviously is kind of a major factor that we see across the state, and that is a service we offer for not only pre-testing but cleanup as well. Yeah.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate on News Talk KGVO. My guest is Matt Kavanaugh, owner of Five Valleys Restoration here in Missoula. Disasters are disasters are disasters, Matt. We've talked a little bit about them. Any emergency you take on can happen anywhere, anytime, but is Western Montana unique in any way in terms of a specific type of emergency occurring, maybe a little more than average?
It's interesting to talk to people from our industry from other climates. We've made some friends with some individuals for some different restoration companies, and they're maybe from the South. And these frozen pipes and the ability to provide heat in certain environments are something they've never had to deal with before, and they prepare themselves. So I would say just our temperature creates, let's take a house fire in the winter. A house fire in the summer, you board the home up and get it ready for cleanup. Well, in the winter, you have to winterize the home. You have to make sure you don't create water damage on top of fire and smoke damage to go with it by all the pipes freezing. One thing with fire is that it gets real hot, and so then the pores on the materials open up and all that odor sticks inside of them. So if you're doing firework in the winter here, you have to recreate the heat to try and pull the odor out of those said materials too. So it's a very interesting, there's science behind it. But that would be our temperature, our drastic temperature changes.
Yeah.
We're not a super humid climate like some of we talk to our friends in Florida and all these different areas where mold, but it is just because it's so humid at all times. We don't have those type of problems.
Well, if it's not readily apparent damage, and I'm sure many, many times it is, but let's say a customer notices maybe a disturbing odor in the house. We talked a little bit about mold issues, for example, but what is the process? They contact you, and what's the next step from there?
So our guys, we have a great staff. Our guys will come in, and the thing with mold, microbial growth, we always call mold the four-letter word, and we try and dance around it. But we'll come in, we can do visual inspections and identify the basics of it, but if it's of major concern that we maybe can't see something, we'll actually bring in a third-party indoor environmental specialist, and they can do air sampling for us, and then we can we can do surface sampling, we can do air sampling, and we can identify the actual spore count that's in the air.
Wow.
And what type of mold it is. Obviously, when we do it, we always take an outdoor sample and an indoor sample, because obviously if it's outdoors, it's most likely going to be indoors too. We want those numbers to try and match up. But there's those certain types of molds that we find that don't exist outdoors, and they're predominantly found with water damages and different things, and those are the ones we start to get concerned about. But that's when we have air sampling done, whether it be pre or post, we're trying to compare to the outside air. So, in the winter, there's no moisture in the air outside, so the mold counts tend to go down. So it's a little more complicated to do mold mitigations in the winter. In the summer and spring, where there's a lot of mold and rotting grass and different things, that the mold counts tend to elevate, which means in theory they'll be like that indoors too.
Are there a lot of different types of mold that you deal with?
Well, there are millions and millions of different types of molds, and mold is ubiquitous. It's everywhere around us. I always make the joke that we have folks that say, well, my home has mold in it. I can't live there. Well, most homes have mold in them. It's just, we have moisture, we have materials that'll support the growth. You're looking underneath sinks and doing different things. We have to then base it on the severity of what's there and what the potential long-term damage can be. Everyone reacts differently to molds. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, so I can't dive into that too much. But the way we view it a lot of times is what the mold could do to the structure. If mold sits there and say it doesn't, the person living there, it doesn't affect them, but it may affect the structure long term. The next step in the mold process becomes dry rot. So if it's lumber, you might start to see rotten lumber and different things if it's continuously wet and moldy over time. So there's so many different effects they could have on a person, on a structure, on a person, and we all react differently to it. Obviously, myself and my guys are around it. We still take the precautionary measures and wear our PPE to protect ourselves, but you got some folks who walk into a moldy atmosphere and they can't spend more than 2 minutes in there. It affects them, and others it may not affect them the same way.
Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate on News Talk KGVO. My guest is Matt Kavanaugh, the owner of Five Valleys Restoration. Also, thank you to some of Diane's marketing partners that help bring you the show every week. Miles Link at Opportunity Bank of Montana, Rob Fleming from Mann Mortgage, Carol Blodgett with MakeItMissoula.com. And back to Matt Kavanaugh at Five Valleys Restoration. You say you're not a doctor, but I imagine you kind of have to be a counselor, Dr. Matt Kavanaugh at times. You got to offer comfort and reassurance frequently, I'm sure, to victims of major damage that you have to take on. I would guess that empathy and sympathy, those have got to be pretty strong suits in your profession.
Empathy is a word that we use a lot around our office.
Yeah.
Understanding people. We're not seeing up at the grocery store to say hello. We're not coming in. A few of the services we offer, from our carpet cleaning to our HVAC cleaning, are just your standard service where they might be happy to see you. But the majority of the services we offer, they don't want us there. They didn't want it to happen in the first place, and it was very unscheduled and untimely.
Yeah.
So our guys do. They end up being a counselor a lot of times, of stepping in and we just listening to the clients, listening to the homeowners in the position they're in, and trying to be empathetic and understanding of the situation they're in, which of course then we have to do too, of being able to respond in a timely manner and do our best. Over Christmas, we had 30 to 40 water losses pouring in at any given time, and it was hard because we obviously don't have a staff to handle 40 water losses in one day. I mean, it's very hard. So being empathetic to the homeowners, of saying we'll get there as quickly as we can. If there is another company that's capable of doing it and coming in, and just we did our best, but our guys do a very good job, and they understand the position people are in, and trying to just calm them and let them know that we can fix it. I mean, my joke with a water loss is always, well, it's not a house fire. The house is still standing. It's not really that funny. But people, you can put a smile on their face a lot of times with it. But that is, a house fire. That is a hard one.
Oh, sure.
You're walking in, they're displaced, their personal belongings some of them are destroyed, and the home that they've made a lot of memories in could potentially be sometimes not salvageable. So you have to, it's a fine line to walk around with folks and try to start to put their lives back together for them.
Well, and I'm sure that they're distressed a lot. They're panicked a lot, and they probably ask you, even though it's not something you can readily answer. But I'm sure they're trying to find out, hey, am I insured for this? Am I insured for this? Well, I guess we better find out, huh? Yeah,
and that is a big thing. Having a good relationship with your insurance agent. Obviously, with the change and increase in building prices, that would be something we're seeing maybe more of as people being a little underinsured and taking that opportunity to reach out to your agent, seeing what you're insured for, looking at your personal belongings and your structure
Right.
and what you would need to put it back together from a, we have a lot of folks who maybe haven't had any construction done in the last 20 years, and they've lived in their home, and they've been lucky enough to not have any problems. So this first time in the last 20 years they've had to have some construction services, it's very expensive comparatively to where it's been with the price of materials, labor, all the different things changing, and that's can often be a little sticker shock, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's having a good relationship with your insurance agent to make sure that you're always up to speed on it would be good.
Matt Cavanaugh with Five Valleys Restoration on Missoula Real Estate Today. Any common errors, Matt, home or business owners make that might prevent some disasters from happening?
Just sometimes just taking those little steps as a homeowner. When you're leaving for periods of time, taking some steps, leaving, making sure your heat's left at a certain temperature. We always use the temperature of above 55 degrees. We've seen a lot of damage this last season where folks maybe who weren't from around here, who owned a property here, left and turned the heat off completely, which, as we all know, can be catastrophic. And so understanding where those numbers need to be, making sure the property has heat, that it's shutting the water off. I have my brother-in-law, we were just all on vacation together. He said, should I shut my water off? And I said, no, just leave your heat on. Doing one or the other, or doing both. If you want to take some of those precautionary measures, you can absolutely do that. Leaving some doors open to access heat to the pipes, those types of things. That's where the damages can happen.
Right.
If you have a vacant home, checking on it frequently when the weather is cold, not every couple of weeks, but every couple of days, and making sure. Batteries and thermostats. Sometimes people don't think of. There's battery backups so that if power goes out or something malfunctions, making sure that it's up to speed. If the thermostat fails, the heat's going to fail. So it's kind of those things things we want to make sure are in place.
Let's get to the doodads here. Your equipment, are there any advancements in technology that have made you even more efficient? And if so, what are some of those that we might find interesting?
Having done this long enough, I always use the example of 25 years ago. I can remember being a 15-year-old kid, and the way a carpet pad is a big sponge, and so when it gets wet, you can tear it out, or what we would do is we had weighted rollers. Well, weighted rollers today are not what they were then. We would literally haul like what you do in your backyard to level out your yard.
Yeah.
We would haul those into a basement. You'd fill them full of water to get the weight in it, and then you would push, and it would squeegee, or it would force all the water out. Well, we would just have our extractor in front of it to extract that out. Well, now we literally have them mechanical. You can ride on them. It's got your weight becomes the weight, and it just it forces all the water out, and you drive back and forth on it, which the advancements have been great. That's just one example. Thermal imagery, the ability, air testing, the different types of sampling we can do to really get down to what we're up against. We do a process called ATP testing, which is just a basic cleanliness testing. But after sewer damage, it's been very effective for us. The very first time I ever saw someone do it, the guy said, "Give me your cell phone." And the guy in the front gave him his cell phone, and he sampled his cell phone. And it was how dirty that phone was through the roof. And that's what we do is we'll take a pre-sample to show how dirty the surfaces are. We'll do all the cleaning processes, and then we'll dry it, and then we'll resample to show that the cleanliness level is below where we need it to be. So just the advancements have been great. Moisture technology for us the Bluetooth technology with our drying equipment, where we can walk in and get immediate readings to our cell phones of how efficient they're working, telling us how much moisture we're actually pulling out of the air in a day. It's extremely effective for drying.
You got to keep up, don't you, man?
You do. There's a lot of technology and advancement, and education is big. I was just over at the building industry office, and we were talking about education for them and us, and our guys are continuously educating, continuously getting CE credits just to stay up with the times.
You see it every day, so it's ho-hum to you, but to a layman like myself, I'll bet the thermal imaging thing you were talking about, I'll bet that is it's fascinating to look at something like that.
I talk about 20 years ago, you'd walk into a water loss and you'd look at a ceiling that was potentially wet. Well, you would have to take a meter that was the size of your hand, and you're trying to check 200 square feet of ceiling what might be wet. Now we can walk in with our thermal imagery, and we can look up, and obviously it's not the end all, but it's a good indicator of what potentially could be wet. And we could say, check that corner, check that corner, check that corner. And you have a guy on a ladder and he's just marking it. We use painter's tape to mark our wet spots. And you do an inspection that took you an hour and a half and 15 minutes. So
wow,
it's improved the processes.
Yeah. What other kinds of, you mentioned your team does some training on that, but what other kinds of training do you like to have your team doing on an ongoing basis? You've got so many different situations that you have to address at any given time.
Yeah, we do a lot of customer service training. Obviously, like we had talked earlier about taking care of people in a time of need, we actually work on that. We have ultrasonic cleaning at our office. We bring in Fireline, who's the manufacturer of our stuff, once a year, and they go through it with our team, and we spend a day or two with them. Just any improvements on how to properly clean the machines and keep them up to speed. We have guys consistently going to classes. We have a couple of guys that are water loss specialists within our organization, master water restorers, and that requires them to stay up with the times and stay up with the education.
Yeah.
Which then they bring back, which is good for us because then we'll let them lead some of our meetings all the way down to the basics of how to put up a proper containment, on how to contain off a room and properly install the zippers on them. Like that stuff we forget sometimes because someone like myself who's been doing it for so long, it's just second nature, but we forget that we're bringing new guys through the trade too.
Yeah. Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate on News Talk KGVO. My guest, Matt Cavanaugh, the owner of Five Valleys Restoration. As you know, I always like to ask about success stories. Any examples of jobs you've done recently that really gave you and Five Valleys Restoration a lot of extra satisfaction?
Just getting people with the freeze thaw that we had is just getting people back in a timely manner. It's I'm not as engaged in the day-to-day as I once was, but I think I've said this in here before too, is I feel so proud of my team when we get those positive reviews. And even if we get a negative one, taking it as a learning experience to create success stories so that we don't go down the same path. But my success stories are my team. Obviously we have fantastic clients and we love hearing from them. But I feel a success story for me is when my team is successful and when clients tell us that, and that makes me very proud to work with these guys and have them part of our team.
Yeah. What makes them that way? Why is Five Valleys Restoration and Cleaning the one to call?
I don't know. I tell people that I used to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning with a panic attack, making sure that we didn't miss something, and maybe that's just me. And my dad taught me as a young man that it can all go away someday, so always do it right. And maybe I've taken that a little bit too much to heart. But just working with our guys about wanting to be, we decided about 4 or 5 years ago to really have a positive impact on our community, not just in business. That's just a small part of it, but a positive impact from our time, our contributions, all those different things. And I think I hope our guys just feed off of what I do. I try to lead by example to them about being a good leader in the community, and which I want them to be then on their job sites so that the clients see it as well, and being positive on our job sites.
Yeah. Well, in the final minute or so here, tell us a little bit more about your, I know it's not brand new, but tell us a little bit more about your new facility out there at the Y.
Yeah, we've been in a facility for the last 10 years that was a little smaller than we'd like. It was about 2,200 square feet, which was getting a little cramped.
Yeah.
We had guys sitting on laps, basically, which wasn't ideal by any means. Last February, actually a year from now, we just moved in a year ago. We've got a brand new 7,000 square foot facility, gets everything inside for us, gets our team under one roof at all times.
Cool.
State-of-the-art cleaning facilities. We've got drying chambers. We've got a beautiful conference area, breakfast nook for our guys so they can actually have space to themselves. They got a locker room, they got showers, they got all things that
wow.
really tries to, it's one thing to do what's best for your clients, but we were trying to build this with what was best for our team. So they would have some of the positive amenities for them too, for all the work they put in.
If we need Five Valleys Restoration there, Matt Cavanaugh, what's the contact information?
406-542-2113. We have teams on call 24 hours a day.
Matt Cavanaugh, the owner of Five Valleys Restoration, this week's guest on Missoula Real Estate Today. I'm glad you could come back in. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Missoula Real Estate Today, presented by Diane Beck of Windermere Real Estate. Email dianebeck@windermere.com or For a complete directory of Diane's listings, visit move2missoula.com. That's move, the number 2, Missoula.com. We'll see you next time on Missoula Real Estate Today.